Welcome to the Exam Study Expert Podcast, helping you ace your exams at school and university through the psychology of high performance and the science of studying smarter, not harder. It's my pleasure to introduce your host, the Cambridge-trained memory psychologist and exam success coach, William Wadsworth.
Hello and welcome back to the Exam Study Expert Podcast. We're back refreshed and raring to go after a little break over the summer the past few weeks. I hope this finds you well too. Whether your term or semester is already in full swing, whether it's starting soon, or whether your scholarly world isn't tied to terms or semesters at all and it's just been a regular few weeks of studying. To regular listeners who've missed us, I hold my hands up. I ended up taking a couple weeks longer off over summer than I intended. I'm so sorry to leave you without your Exam Study Expert Podcast fix, but fear not, we're back with you now through to next summer with a new episode coming every Sunday as normal. And even while we've been off air the last few weeks, we've been hard at work in the background on recordings and ideas and interviews for the new season, so there's lots of great stuff coming your way. To ease ourselves back into things, I'm kicking things off again this week with an episode on learning languages with my friend Kerstin from fluentlanguage.co.uk and the Fluent Language podcast. It's been some time since I've done a sort of a subject or domain-specific episode, but it's something I like to throw in from time to time, particularly in the past. So if you browse the less recent back catalogue of episodes, you'll find some nice episodes on chemistry. That was number 36. Business and MBAs. That was number 34. PhDs, 17. Music. That was number 8. Latin, number 9. English language, number 5. Maths, number 4. I was doing quite a lot of it in the early days, wasn't I? Today's episode, to be honest, is actually more for a general audience of hobby language learners than full-time language scholars studying a language at college or university. Now, if you are a full-time language student, I think this should definitely be of interest to you. But I think Kerstin's approach is in particular aimed at the kind of the general or like hobbyist language learner. And I think so many of us fit into that camp, or at least aspire to. From observation and experience, I think people with a love of learning, and that's probably you if you're listening to this podcast, are divided into two camps when it comes to language learning. You're either in the camp of people who are actively spending time regularly improving your language skills, or you're in the camp of people who are not actively doing that, but you kind of wish you were on some level. And for many years, I've been in the latter category and not been working on language at all, but it's always been something I felt I should really do. But inspired by recording this interview with Kerstin, as I did a couple of months ago now, I picked up my French course on Duolingo again, and I'm now packing a 50-day plus streak on Duolingo. And more importantly, I feel like I'm making real progress with the language again, bolstering my high school French and starting to pick up some new words and starting to get the basics just a little bit more fluent again and having fun with it. And speaking of fun, one of the reasons I wanted to put this episode right at the start of the season is that there's a really nice vibe running throughout the conversation about just love of learning and that intrinsic love for just learning new things, not only just for the outcomes of the skills or the qualifications it might give you, but just the sheer joy of learning. And surely that's something we all want to tap into and nurture. So I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Without further ado, let's meet Kerstin and talk all things languages.
Hello, I'm Kerstin. I run a website called fluentlanguage.co.uk, where for over 10 years now I've been writing, podcasting, talking, and making a lot of courses, really looking at language learning. And my favorite space within that is to function as a language coach, which is really looking at the bigger picture of how we learn and to share study mindset and study skills, tips, and dig into it with people. My happiest target person, I guess, is the adult learner. I'm so impressed. I'm forever so impressed. And I love it so much when people choose to do a hard thing, which is learning a language, and when people feel inspired to do this. And I myself have learned probably something between 10 and 13 languages, and I speak I can speak to you in 4 without embarrassment and 5 with embarrassment. So I really, really love learning languages. I love sharing that with the world, and I just love it when it really stays with you for your life, because in my experience, that's when you get good.
You've obviously had a huge passion for languages. It's it's been a huge part of your professional world and what you teach and what you put out into the world. And it's obviously been an important part of your private life as well, with all that learning that's gone into learning 10 to 13 languages and being able to chat in 4. Let's start with why. Inspire us with the joys and benefits of language learning.
Why do I love learning languages in general? Oh, there is so much. Look, okay. First of all, they're out there, right? Languages, every single language, even if it has like 2 speakers, is an entire world, is an entire universe, a different way of seeing the world. They are so close to us. It's so easy. No matter where you live, you're walking down the road, you're so likely, unless you live in a village where I come from, but like if you say you walk until you've seen 100 people, you're really likely to hear a different language. And a language is not just, oh, I'm interested in words or whatever. I do get excited when, like, I made a smoothie this morning and I'm stood there going, banana, that's a great word, isn't it, really? Banana. And so I do have a fascination with words in themselves. But for me, the real magic is languages are genuinely spoken by people, and they give you such an insight window, access into an entirely different world that is unique to languages. And it's, in other words, it's magic. So that's why. I just love it.
Yeah. That ability to be able to connect with other people. You know, a big part of your why, I guess, is that just intrinsic love of the world of language. And it's clearly something you find just kind of that intrinsic interest. I guess not everybody might have that to start. It may be something they cultivate and nurture throughout their language learning journey. But if you kind of give someone, I guess, a kind of a vision for the future, you know, in X years' time, when you've done all this work, when you've stayed consistent, this is what you'll be able to do. What would be some of the big, shiny pots of gold at the end of the rainbow that you kind of point people to as some of the biggest, oh yeah, that's really cool, I should therefore learn a language?
It depends on your personal goal. But for me personally, the biggest one I can think of, the one I really want when I'm just sort of making tentative steps, is I want to fall in love. Sometimes you have 3 words and you're already really into a language. Yeah. If you're learning, let's say, German, right? At the start, you might not imagine that learning German could be fun, but you might find that somehow there is something that you can access in the poetry of Goethe. Somehow there is something that you can access in just learning more about the country and the landscapes. Maybe it's techno in Berlin. For many people, maybe controversially, it's the music of Rammstein. Whatever, you know, maybe there is something that you kind of find out along the way. So one of my big kind of pot of gold would be you fall in love, right? You really feel like this is so cool. The second one is you get to feel like you're an absolute genius superhero. You get to feel like you're so cool. Oh my God, I can do this, right? Because when you're first having those conversations, maybe not the first time, but don't you feel kind of, when you go to Spain, or I don't know, because I've never done the una cerveza por favor in Spain, but I have gone to Wales to a festival, and I was still really early. I could say like 4 things and really didn't know much Welsh. But it was the Eisteddfod, so the very Welsh language first. And I knew how to say, and I knew what the guy meant when he handed me my drink, and then he said, "In rhywbeth arall." And I was like, whoa, that means, do you want anything else? And I was like, oh, I knew that, yeah. Right? And then you get to walk away and you feel so good about yourself, and you feel this real buzz of, I'm a genius, everyone, I'm a genius. And that is also a thing that you don't even have to get good. You don't have to study for years and years. That can come to you really, really early. And I think languages really give you this really, really well. So like adrenaline boost. And then thirdly, it's the benefits that a language can bring to your life from a kind of social, from really your quality of life perspective. So you may find that when you're traveling, you've got an easier time settling into the place, got an easier time making friends with people. Maybe if you have a little bit of a chat with the taxi driver, you get that little discount, you get that little extra tip. Maybe you access a whole new group of friends. And many people actually learn languages because of someone they know. So the more German my husband learns, the more like he feels more comfortable talking to my parents, talking to my family. But also he understands more my world and where I come from, and even as a couple, we can develop this sort of deeper level, a little bit of code, and like my nickname for him is in German and stuff. So the ways you can strengthen a bond with a different person is really, really strong. And also if you're a super rational person, it is statistically relevant for how much you get paid in your career. So it's also worth money. So we've gone from the heart all the way to the purse.
We love it. Our full spectrum. I was reading the story on your website about how you started saving considerably on your Russian taxi driver bills once you learned other amounts of money than 300.
Yes. Well, I used to have a job that required travel to two places, Kazakhstan and Russia. And in Kazakhstan, the taxis are a bit different. You kind of stick your hand out and then just a random person stops. Sometimes with like Guns N' Roses blaring out the window. It's amazing. I love them. And then you get in and then you say where you want to go. So you can just about you can go, Holiday Inn, and then say the name of the streets. When you don't speak Russian, you can maybe manage that. And then you say a number and see if they say yes or no. And I'd found that in Kazakhstan, I'd learned how to say 300 in Russian. So every taxi ride just had to be 300 thingies, tenge, they're called, because I just couldn't say anything else. But it was a really good deal. But then I had to go to Russia for work. And in Russia, the rubles, if you have 300 rubles, that's much more money than 300 tenge. Yeah. But it was still all I could say. So I had to learn different numbers all of a sudden, because otherwise I was overpaying everybody for the taxis. And when you have to go back to work or your expenses, it looks a bit dodgy. It looks a bit weird.
That's really funny. You probably have a deeper insight into this than me. So I'd love to hear your perspective as well. But it strikes me that one of the challenges is that this is such a long-term project. And it's a real challenge to stay, you talked about motivation. I think the real challenge, not only to get started, but also once you get past that honeymoon period and the buzz of, I'm learning a few words, keeping yourself going when you start to realize just how big a gulf there is between learning those first few words and starting to get to the point where you can actually have, decent informal conversations with people. What are your thoughts on some of those, I guess, mindset and motivation challenges?
You are 100% correct that learning a language to, say, the level at which I speak English, I don't want to say it's a lifelong project, because I think I'm going to live longer than now. So, but it does. I have been learning English for like 30 years, right? So it does take a long, long time. And I live here and I'm married to, an English native speaker and all that kind of stuff. But do you need to get your language to this level? Is that the only idea of success that you have? Yeah. Probably not, right? You just kind of want to function and you want to build your goals along the way. So when I work with my clients, students, I usually work with two types of goals, and I try to split it out because people struggle to translate a goal into action, because very often with language learning, your goals, if I ask you your goal, or if I ask what you want, like it's kind of wishy-washy, because you want to be fluent and you want to have conversations. And then people sometimes want to get more specific. They're like, I want to have a 15-minute conversation. And that's nice, but you kind of don't know when you're there. And then even if you're there, what you really want is the like instant ability to have conversations with anyone about anything. You want all that. So what's helpful, because that really is, William, you're right, something that would take a long time and a lot of confidence, and it doesn't come for free. What really helps is to kind of break down, capture what I call your vision goal. So that's really earlier I talked about falling in love. That's the bit that's kind of making you, maybe you're not quite in love yet, maybe you're flirting with a language, but like, what's the thing that's intriguing? What's drawing your interest? Why are you interested in this particular language? What's your reason? And then from that, okay, well, what do you want out of it? Not every language has to be learned to fluency. When I stopped learning Russian, I was able to stop it because I thought, do you know what? I can read Cyrillic now, and that's actually good enough for me, and I feel pretty cool already. So, like I said, for me, it's like it's a confidence booster, clearly. Like, it makes me feel good about myself. But then that's my second point in this vision goal. I usually work with students on really thinking of a scenario. Like, what does life look like when you've reached your goal? Who are you going to be? And how has it changed you? As, you know, what does it mean about your capability? What does it mean about your result, right? It's more than just this sort of measurable yes, no binary. Are you fluent? Are you not fluent? It's kind of what kind of growth. You mentioned personal growth earlier, I think, in our pre-chat. What kind of personal growth have you had out of it? So really, what gets you excited? What's motivating? And then that's your vision. And if we can get that to a way that you feel excited and positive and really like, yeah, now I know why I'm learning Spanish. That's great. We're going to take that. We're going to put it to one side because no one can really work with that. That's the exciting, but also really wibbly wobbly bit. So then we need to break it down. And then I usually say, okay, what are you working on right now? Where do you want to be in a month? So we're going we're zooming in. We're getting way more specific. And we're thinking about what is a way that you can practice. Typically with language learning, we want to practice listening, speaking, reading, and writing. What are kind of actual, smart, specific, measurable, relevant, time-bound? No one knows what the R really stands for. But, like, what are the smart, like the specifics of what we're actually going to do? And then your goals become about read 5 pages in this book, get to chapter so-and-so, attend my class with so-and-so. And that way you feel, because what you don't feel otherwise, and what doesn't work with motivation is you feel like you're out of control because you're never getting anywhere. So if we can break things down and really look at what you want to do in 3 months, what you want to do in a month, you start to see your own progress. And invisible progress is a massive motivation killer in language learning. I've read some scientific literature about it, and something that really stuck with me is, I think it's Zoltan Dernier, who's just the best. Zoltan Dernier says motivation is cyclical, and that to me really made sense. It doesn't go, I need to be really motivated, and then I'll be motivated. It's no, you just need to do a thing, and then you'll feel a success, and then you'll be motivated, and you'll feel a success. So we try to kind of get the plan in place so that you don't have to think very much about, am I doing this, am I not? You try and just make it, I talk about it, it's called a language habit system. So we're really talking about make it a habit. Don't even think about it. And then just keep going. And that way, you don't have to worry, am I there yet? Am I there yet? Because that's going to drain you, and that's going to make you doubt yourself and your own abilities. Instead, you can have these kind of small successes, because it's honestly not true that achieving a goal has to be like this massive, impressive single thing every time. And that way, I have found when I've worked with people, the motivation really has become better because your successes become visible. Your successes, you've broken it down, it's more manageable. And it's just the way it works.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, when you were talking about breaking that big vision goal down into, well, what am I going to do this month? We sort of talked on the podcast before about the distinction between outcome goals and process goals. And a process goal is that thing that you can do. So like you going to a certain class, reading pages of a book, those are things that are totally in your control. So focusing on those in the short term, whilst also kind of having this grand vision that you maybe check in with slightly less frequently once you've got the ball rolling.
there's a mindset decision that you can make, which is just, I'm doing this. Really to just decide, I'm now learning French. And it doesn't mean I'm now fluent in French or something like that. It literally is just, I'm now learning French. And for me, it's, I'm now learning Welsh. I don't every week look forward to my 2-hour Zoom Welsh class. That would be maybe, or like firing up Microsoft Teams, the world's most annoying software. But I do it, and I kind of just book in at the start of every year, and it has enough fun moments to always keep me excited. But it's the bigger picture of, I'm learning Welsh, and this is like real life evidence that I'm doing it, but I'm already the kind of person who learns Welsh. That is a huge just shift, because that way then you can do it, because you can certainly learn, you can certainly try. So everything you do then just adds up to what you already know, which is you're learning French, you're learning German.
Yeah. Building that identity for yourself. You talk about that grand goal, that vision of, what you're able to do, have that 15-minute conversation or whatever. I'm at a relatively early point on learning my second language, which is French. I don't speak very good French at all, but you can have some pretty cool wins even at a relatively early stage. Like I don't remember the content of the conversation, but I remember what happened. There was a couple behind me in a checkout queue. I think it was in a different country, so I think I was on holiday at the time. There was a confusion with somebody else, and they turned to me and asked, do I speak German? And I didn't really speak any German, but I said, parlez-vous français? And they're like, oh, we can speak French. And so we both had this third, this other language. They didn't speak English, I didn't speak German, but we could connect via this language. We both spoke a bit of French, and I had enough French that we could figure out whatever they were stuck with. And that was amazing. To be able to do that kind of thing is really fun.
That's it. So if you ever think like, why learn a language? To me, that those moments are a huge reason to do it, because you probably, how did you feel walking away from that?
Well, it was great. And to your point about cyclical motivation, that sort of thing only then inspires more action taking, which makes you better and brings more of those moments in future. So it sort of sets up that virtuous spiral, I guess. One question I had, from your experience and the people you've worked with over the years, what are some of the characteristics and traits? We may have touched on some of these already, but are there any other sort of characteristics or traits that you notice in the people that stay the course over the years? What are the habits of successful language learners?
Ooh, every person, in my opinion, is already a successful language learner. You have them inside of you, right? So you don't have to model anything that other people do. But I know what you're getting at is really clever. It's a really good question as well. Something that happens when you're learning a language is that people kind of maybe notice about you. And for a good while, if your friends notice about you and it's a fairly new thing, you're going to get constantly asked how it's going. And you're always going to feel like you have to show something for yourself. Right? And then you feel like you have to prove yourself, and that results in you feeling like you're not actually doing very well, and yet you kind of suck and you're a bit embarrassed, and then you don't really continue with it because it's actually very embarrassing. Who were you to attempt this in the first place? And I'm going to use the word polyglot. So I have been to many polyglot events. So this is people who speak, I don't know, some people have like, you must speak this many languages to be a polyglot, but really it's just people who are nerds about learning lots of languages, let's face it. So who will speak lots of languages. And I would say there is not one type of person that has that in common. There's also some rumor around, if you look on Reddit, like these are all left-handed males on the spectrum or something like that. I am left-handed, but I don't really necessarily subscribe to that. I think one thing though that really you have in common, almost in your nature of going to a conference where everyone's going to learn a language, is, how am I going to put this? Like, you feel like it's there for you, it's open to you. Like, you feel like you can, and it's that mindset that I mentioned earlier. It's sort of like it's your right to learn a language, if I'm going to put it like that. Not this hesitant, can I, may I, am I good enough? That's sort of out of the window once you get to language number whatever. you've got more belief that you can do it because you've done it before in some kind of way, shape, or form. That's why I also mentioned the dialects earlier. Like, you can already do it. You can already do it. Go team.
Yeah.
But there is that. And then I think apart from that, so I'm the kind of language learner who does maybe, if I'm working really hard in a week, I might do 4 hours. But realistically, not every week. I'm a slow learner. I've been learning Welsh for 8 years. Yes, my level is like advanced now. It says on the book it's B2. Other people might get to B2 in, like you mentioned earlier, like you might get there in 4 months, right? So I don't put a lot of time into my languages. I would not enjoy it as much. I do it in a way that I think is fun. But I have worked with people who came to me for coaching, and they say, well, I'm only putting in 5 hours a day. I'm not sure it's enough. And I'm thinking, what?
Wow. That's huge.
it's yeah, exactly. It's huge. So it's not about the hours from what I've seen. It's not about the specific methods, but I do think that like a lot of it just comes with the experience of having learned a language. And what really helps is when you kind of self-observe and you learn what works for you, and you stick with what really works for you. And the better you get at it, the more you kind of stay the course, and you find the resources that work for you, and you start to get a sense of, do I like having my teacher self going through the book? Do I like a group class? Do I like Duolingo? Do I not? So all those different things kind of come together. And the other thing is as well to break out of the textbook and really have some level of real life application to find your point of interest, find something that really attracts you to the language and gives you more than just, okay, here's the grammar table and here are some examples. Now we're going to fill in some gaps. Like, that is boring. That is dry. But imagine, all right, I had this beautiful crepe with apple and whatever on my holiday. Why not search for recipes online or get myself like a French recipe book, and I'm going to make it from the recipe in French. It's going to be so cool. And you can involve your family, and your kid can help, and you can teach them a little bit. Like, the more you can live your life and really let the language in, and that is consistent, I've seen with lots of people, I think the better it gets. And on a more practical level, of course, like it helps to pay attention to making sure you've covered your listening, reading, speaking, and writing, so that you've practiced a little bit in every aspect. Those are some things that I could name. And I hope that I'm telling you them, and I'm telling listeners them in a way that really makes you feel like, yes, you can. You don't have to like change how your day is structured or how your life is structured just to learn a foreign language, because you don't have to. It works when you figure out how to make it work for you.
You don't have to suddenly start writing with your left hand to become a successful language learner.
Oh my God, no, I don't have to turn into a man. Thank God.
Phew. For those returning to language learning or possibly even starting for the first time, are there any particularly good resources? I know there's a wealth of podcasts, websites, books, apps. It's almost overwhelming, right? And I guess that's the question. Are there any particularly top tips that are particular favorites of yours that you'd suggest people look at? And that could include some of your own resources as well, of course.
I think, if you're an early language learner, my thing that I think I've come to believe is that when you first start learning a language and you're kind of on the language learning, often gets like the levels are often described on this thing called the Common European Framework of Reference, which just means if I say A1 or A2 and you don't know what I'm talking about, you Google that and you have a descriptor. But there's like levels A, B, and C, and it goes A is beginner, B is basically intermediate, and your C is when you get advanced. So if someone on the A levels, A1, A2, this goes, I think all the languages I've learned has been pretty similar. You want a little bit of grammar. I don't think you need to dig massively into the rules, because really what you're kind of learning is those basics of how sentences really work, right? So as long as you kind of have a sense of how sentences work, and I've studied, I mean, I can't speak for every language in the world, but I've studied Mandarin Chinese, I've studied Russian, I've played around with some Indonesian. I once tried Vietnamese and then was very scared of it because it's all really short stuff with a million diacritics. So it was like, whoa, I need proper time for this. But then I've also learned Spanish and French and Welsh, obviously, one of my things, and I speak German. So long story short, sentences kind of always work in the same way because we're always trying to say, like, here is a person or a thing, and they did this other thing. You know, that's always what you're trying to say. That's pretty universal. So you don't really need to dig into grammar that much right at the start, but you need your vocab to build up, right? You need to be able to actually say stuff. And whether you say stuff in the correct form doesn't matter as much as even just knowing the word for it, right? At the start, it's a lot of word, point. And then when you get to the intermediate levels, I think grammar plays a bigger role. My general impression, every language I've gone to B2 and above in, you're not actually learning anything new at that level. You're just refining. So that's really just a way of saying, don't worry too much about grammar at the start, because later on you'll have plenty of time to work with that when you're not also trying to remember 200 words that are completely new to you. So in terms of resources then, it's really difficult to like recommend something specific because every person is different, and what one person enjoys, another might not enjoy, right? So it really is a case of, so my tip is, if you can at the start, just try out loads of stuff and discard very quickly. Don't feel like you have to get to the end of every book. That's something I would really recommend. Personally, I'm not really a huge fan of apps. I love textbooks, but then realistically, I don't do them. I really love, get yourself, like, you can get one-to-one tutors fairly easily online now and fairly affordably on something like italki. So do try that out. Maybe join a group class if you like that kind of thing. Some people get really frustrated if the pace isn't right. Some people get frustrated at their teachers. Like, you have to have a teacher that helps you build your confidence. If you feel like you're not doing well and you're a beginner, then I think your teacher could do more work to help you feel better about yourself. But that's, again, this sort of coach's perspective. But you don't have to like sign up with the official, like, if you have to go to the Goethe Institute to learn the official German, because realistically, it's all the same. So there is a series of online courses where I have made one called German Uncovered that are done by Story Learning. And because I've made the German Uncovered, I know it's really solid because I know how much work it was, but I'm also really familiar with the method. I think the method is good for lots of people because it starts you off looking at a story before you even know much, and it gives you a lot of those success feelings of, I can figure this out straight away. So have a look at those. In terms of my own stuff, I would love if somebody is a little bit beyond the start, like, you could use this to start off, but I think if you want a consistent routine, which usually means you're at the point where you're saying, okay, right now the initial 3-month buzz has worn off, but I do want to stick with this. What do I do now? Then I would really love to draw your attention to the Language Habit System, which is a course that I teach. And there's a free training that I've set up to go around that. So I would love to just offer that to people. It's called The Little Known Secret to Success in Language Learning. And it's all about, not going to tell you, you have to come and, come and watch, I guess. But it's a great training. It's had a lot of really great feedback. So I'd love for you to have a look at that. And otherwise, just really throw yourself. That's my tip. It's not one specific resource. My real tip is for like 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks periodically, throw yourself into like language learning wonderland, try out as much as you possibly can. And then at the end, see what you want to stick with for the next little while. And then that way you start to figure out what works for you. And that is the way to integrate language in your life. And that's the way to not stop and give up.
Kerstin, I wonder if we could wrap this thing up with with a top little language learning tip, either bringing together something we talked about before or something else you really wish you could sneak in at the end for our listeners today.
okay, I'm gonna say one of the things. I'm gonna say two things that I say now at the start of almost every training. And the first one is everything works, right? Because some people will go, oh, so and so doesn't work, or oh, this is like the best course ever. You're probably gonna find yourself online reading reviews. My experience has been everything works, but lots and lots of stuff isn't fun for everybody, right? So no matter what it is that you try, you're not wasting your time. It is all adding up to the result that you want. So everything works. And the other one, which is how I learn vocab and what's really helped me kind of take it easier when somebody's giving me massive lists of words, in a conversation, is to tell myself, if it's important, it'll come back. So you don't have to memorize everything. Forgetting is normal. Forgetting is part of the process. It really is kind of how your memory works in a way. And every word in another language, if it's important, you will encounter it again. You will have another time when you don't know it until you suddenly know it. And if that doesn't happen, then it wasn't very important work.
I love that. If it's important, it will come back. Have patience.
That's
have
it.
Confidence. Trust the process.
That's the difference in a way between learning a language for life and learning, like for an exam, where you can't be like, if it's important, it'll come back. No, you have to know this on the day. So there's the difference, really.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, look, Kerstin, this has been huge fun. Thank you so much for coming on today, helping inspire us and get us started or rekindle a love of language learning. Super enjoyed this conversation, and I'm certainly feeling inspired. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me and letting me come and make my speeches. I like making these speeches. So yes, see everybody who wants to learn a language online. Come and say hi.
And if you're interested in learning more with Kerstin, she's got a great range of courses about language learning generally, including courses on vocab memory, writing your way to fluency, habits for language learning, and cracking the grammar code. She's got a bunch of free options and resources as well. You can browse her entire catalogue at examstudyexpert.com/fluent. Kerstin's even been kind enough to offer us a little referral fee to the show on most of her courses if you go on to buy anything from her, at no extra cost to you, of course. So a little purchase, treating yourself to a little language learning purchase with Kerstin is a nice way to offer a little bit of financial support to the Exam Study Expert podcast as well. So do check out what she has to offer at examstudyexpert.com/fluent. I'll be back next week with a special episode featuring my longtime mentor and friend, Alan Donegan, talking about the power of personal development to quite literally change your life. And I don't think that's hyperbole, including in the domain of scholarship and all things studying, but also applying the same principles to other areas of your life as well. Something a little bit different for you and stretching our usual study and learning tips remit just a little bit. But I'm indulging myself in this one because I think it will be of considerable interest and value to so many of you. And also Alan's amazing. So please do watch out for that hitting your podcast feed next week and tune in if you can. For now, thanks so much for listening today and wishing you every success, as always, in your studies.
If you've got exams coming up, you can now get all of William's favourite tips and tricks to save you time and get you higher grades, all in one handy cheat sheet. Grab your copy at examstudyexpert.com/free tips. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.